What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like, subscribe as you tune into the channel, check out the content. And with that being said, man, I want to talk about college basketball and how much college basketball, like the landscape and the look of college basketball, has changed. To me, college basketball is not the same as it was back when I was watching college basketball. um, it's just changed, and you can see it. It's just that like players today, they don't get coached the same way those college athletes got coached back in the day, right? Because and now you have what like with this NIL and kids are making so much money now. It's hard to get a kid that's making millions of dollars to really to listen to the coach, like as far as the kid is concerned, as far as they know, they got the money, they have made it, especially kids who are coming from you know a poor underprivileged background, right? Once they get that money, and that's more money that they have ever had in their life, they feel like they have made it, right? And so it will be hard, to be coached. So I got to thinking about like guys who coached basketball, when I first started watching basketball, like John Thompson. John Thompson coached at Georgetown University. And, you know, coaches back then were like coaches were even more famous than the players, right? John Thompson, I can remember a lot of the players, but none of those players on Georgetown team was like a bigger personality than John Thompson. And he had Patrick Ewing, he had Allen Iverson, um, man, he had David Wingate, but nobody on campus was as big as John Thompson. When John Thompson, like when he was on that campus, no player. Um, what he had, Michael Graham, and I mean, I can name a ton of ball players that came through there that were really, really good basketball players, but nobody was big as John Thompson, right? And so because of that, John Thompson he could coach those guys, right? He can keep those guys in line. He could tell those guys what they needed to hear instead of what they wanted to hear. And it wasn't, without even a second thought. It was, it was something that you didn't, as a coach, he never even really probably had to think about. Um, this kid is making millions of dollars, and I got to be careful about the way I coach him. I got to be careful about the way that I speak to him. That probably wasn't even a thought. Then you go to like Dean Smith, right? Dean Smith at North Carolina had Michael Jordan, James Worthy, Sam Perkins, Jimmy Black. Man, who else? Man, he had a ton of bad dudes down there, right? Did I say Sam Perkins? He had a ton of bad dudes down there, but still, he was bigger than all of them. Like on campus, on that team, like he was the program. Dean Smith was the program. You got on Dean Smith program, or you didn't. I mean, you weren't going to make it. And Dean Smith was allowed to. He could coach back then. He was allowed to teach you how to play the game of basketball the right way. And some people even say that that's why Michael Jordan turned out to be as great as he was. A great athlete. Michael Jordan was very competitive, but you need a great coach like that to take refine Mike's game and just help Mike to take it to the next level, right? And that's what Dean Smith did for all of his ball players, and he was allowed to do that. He didn't have to worry about his players, trying to build their brand. He didn't have to worry about guys being on their cell phones at practice and checking their messages and trying to see who tweeting them. None of that stuff. He didn't have to put up with that. All he had to do was focus on teaching these guys how to play basketball. And that's why like that era of basketball, right, was the great, to me, was the greatest era of basketball. Now, not to say that like coaches that come behind them don't know the game or haven't studied the game like those guys did, but coaches today just got so much more, in my opinion, on their plate. You know, like I said, you got to worry about a kid making millions of dollars, don't like the way you talk to him. You're gonna put himself in the portal. Then these kids trying to build a brand. You know, it wasn't a brand wasn't a thing back then. You had to put in the work, a lot of work. You know, you talking about a brand. Then you talk about Nolan Richardson, right? Nolan Richardson at Arkansas, man, he was a beast. He had Todd Day over there, man. I mean, that Nolan Richardson, like when he was at Arkansas, man, that program he put together, I think they used to call it 40 minutes of hell, man. Cause like once you stepped on that court, they just they just harass you from tip off to the last second went off the clock, right? And that just was the kind of program that he ran. He didn't have to worry about like his ball players again. You know, he was able to coach and all kids like push back on authority, right? But when you push back on authority, he had leverage. These coaches had leverage, whereas though they, you know, they can put you as a player in your place and let you know what was what. And it's just not like that in today's basketball. You know, it's not like that. You know, and then also like a guy like Bobby Knight. And Bobby Knight, man, was um he was famous for just like for being a tyrant, right? Bobby Knight was famous for being a tyrant. But Bobby Knight taught guys again how to play basketball. I could not imagine like being at a Bobby Knight practice and somebody's cell phone go off. You know, like what would happen to that player if their cell phone go off or somebody was concerned about their brand and they didn't put the team first. They worried about, you know, their social media accounts and their brands and stuff like that. Or just imagine telling Bobby Knight like how you have to speak to a player or how you have to respect a player, man. That just would have been a funny sight. Um, you know, to be able to tell Bobby Knight something like that. And like Bobby Knight wasn't an easy coach, but and Bobby Knight probably he probably did some things that a lot of other coaches or said some things that a lot of other coaches wouldn't have said. But still, man, when you have like you had a guy like Isaiah Thomas who just loved him to death, and Isaiah Thomas wasn't an easy, you know, he wasn't an easy guy to coach, and then he was the perfect person to coach Isaiah Thomas. You know, you had Isaiah Thomas coming out of Chicago, and like this was a perfect guy to coach. Um, you know, from the streets of Chicago, this was a perfect guy to coach him, man. He was a tough guy. They told a story about Bobby Knight almost getting into a fight with one of Isaiah Thomas' brothers, right? And once Isaiah Thomas' mother saw that, she was like, okay, that's where my baby going at, you know, because you could coach. You know, people was allowed, you know, they respected authority. And if this guy was willing to come into your house and defend what he believed in, then that heck yeah, she wanted her son to go there and play for Bobby Knight. So and they remain, you know, Isaiah and Bobby Knight remain close. And Bobby Knight was not the kind of guy that was just going to sugarcoat as you know, sugarcoat things for Isaiah. Wasn't gonna tell Isaiah everything he wanted. You know, he wasn't a warm and fuzzy person for Isaiah, but he just told Isaiah what he needed to know and what he expected from him. And Isaiah played basketball for him. And that's how that generation was, though. You know, like you respected authority. You know, you respected a coach because he was your coach. Um, and that's just how you got the best out of a player. But now, you know, like I said, I don't know. I don't think that these guys. I know Bobby Knight would not be able to coach today. You know, Bobby Knight had to leave Indiana under because of the way his coaching style eventually got him pushed out of Indiana. And so, if you wanted to bring Bobby Knight back to coach, you know, if you know, like a coach like Bobby Knight wouldn't be able to survive, man. Um, it just wouldn't happen. Dean Smith, I think Dean Smith probably would get frustrated too, you know, with what's going on with these. And it's not about the NIL and kids getting money. It's about the level of respect, you know, that they have for authority. Like kids have to respect authority. Same thing with like Nolan Richardson and John Thompson. Um, none of these guys just warm fuzzy guys. They just the kind of men who just tell young men how to they develop young men into men. So it would be so hard for these guys, in my opinion, to coach today, man. And yeah, that's why that era was so tough because it was I enjoyed watching that era. That was a tough era for because you just had basketball players, the best athletes, teamed up with the best coach, and that made the best product. And so that's why you can't have the best coaches with a subpar product, and then you want them to turn. You're gonna get subpar. So that's my take on it, man. Y'all make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to leave a comment, and I will check you all out in the next video. Peace.